important to us, the issues that we feel impact our communities, will be listened to by these two candidates and hopefully acted upon in the best interest of our communities and the future of our children, as well as education. And there are several different issues that we all feel are important. Now, I have described this as the not your typical debate. Well, part of the reason is that there have been several debates, and I'm sure that both of our candidates can tell you that it's been a grind out there, and lots of questions by many different folks. We're not here today to specifically ask any, hey, gotcha questions because we prefer one candidate over another candidate. We are here today to answer your questions. So I would like to thank, and I'm really happy to say this again, our over 10,000 listeners who join us in community radio at Rainier Avenue Radio. We've worked really hard at being part of our community, and this is why we did it, so that we could make sure that you have the opportunity, among other things, to not only have a voice in our community, but be informed voters when issues like these come up. And we hope that both of our candidates, whatever happens, continue to realize that we're a resource for information to our community. The way that this is going to work is each candidate will have 2 minutes for opening statements, and then they'll have 2 minutes to respond to questions. Our questions will be coming from members of our community who represent various constituencies. Everything from CAIR, which is the Council on American Islamic Relations, from Thrive Washington, representing early learning educational opportunities, a number of different things. We've got a student from high school. We have students who had a class project working on this particular mayor's race, and it culminated in questions that they were going to ask our candidates. Of course, our very own Bert Kaili from Phil-Am Radio, one of our popular shows that has a huge listening audience overseas and contributes to our international audience, is here as well. So we're going to get started. We had a coin flip, and each candidate will get 2 minutes. I would like to say once again, thank you to our candidates, Ms. Cary Moon and Ms. Jenny Durkan. Thank you for joining us. Ms. Durkan, you will be going first with your opening statement, and we are going to get started right now.
Thanks so much, and thank you for having us here. This is great. I wish all the listeners could see this great room, because on the walls are what community has decided that it needs for this community to thrive. And it is an amazing thing that over the years how involved people have been to make sure that we really keep Seattle for Seattle, but also that a community keeps what it thinks is most special. We're at a real crossroads, I think, right now in Seattle. The city has grown so rapidly, and we have seen such rapid here any longer, and so they are separated from families. So we need to move forward. The next mayor has to move immediately on affordability, homelessness, transportation, but really the important thing is to do what was seen in this room. How do we build community? How do we build community? And if I'm mayor, I want to make sure that we build community from the grass up. Because we've had 2 administrations where everything has been top down, where the city hall thinks it knows best, but sometimes those best solutions, those best things come right from community who know best what they need to thrive. And so I'm looking forward to this debate and these questions and talking with Seattle, and I'd love your support and love to be your mayor. Thank you.
All right, Ms. Moon, your 2 minutes.
All right, thank you so much. It is great to be here at the final discussion about the future of our city with great community members who care so deeply about keeping Seattle a place where everyone can afford to stay here. I decided to run for mayor probably when Donald Trump got elected, because I realized then that with so much being dismantled in the other Washington and so much ugliness rising in power, that we need to take the lead in cities to keep democracy functioning for the people. There's so much we can do here as a city. We have incredible wealth. We have creativity. I've seen in community after community constructive solutions for the issues that are facing us. We have a spirit of innovation. We have shared progressive values like probably no place else in the country. But I believe, and I think many folks in this city understand, that we are headed towards a cliff. We see the affordability crisis. We see communities of color being pushed out due to gentrification and displacement. We see a rising achievement gap, opportunity gap in our schools. We see racial wealth inequality that is completely unfair and wrong, and we need solutions. So I entered this race not with a list of problems, but with a list of solutions, because these problems are tricky, but people in Seattle are smart, and we need to be having a discussion around our shared future based in constructive solutions for how we're going to get there. So I have led this campaign the whole time since April to talk about solutions, to listen to community, to build solutions together, to build the momentum that we need, because in this time of Trump, we need to be for something. We need to have a shared collective vision that we're working towards together, because that is how we are strongest. So I'm ready to hear your questions. I really look forward to this dialogue, because this is where we make good things happen in this city, by working together.
All right. We are also broadcasting this live on Facebook, so I will say hello and wave to the Facebook audience. This will be your first question. It will be a wild card question, and you will each get 30 seconds to answer this question. And Ms. Durkan, you'll be going first. And so this is the question. There are a number of reasons why I asked this question. So you just have to trust me on that one, and I hope that I get an honest answer. And I know that there are a lot of people who will definitely identify with me when I ask this question. When you look at me, what do you see?
I see a man who is tall, or looks tall from this chair, but I know that most people see a black man whose hair looks different from theirs, whose eyes look different from theirs, and they make all sorts of judgments based on that. Implicit bias is just as powerful a force, if not more powerful than explicit bias. So I will tell you that as mayor, I will not only continue to work on that, I had training for my office before, I've worked hard on those issues in my career, and I think we've got a long ways to go. We know that racism is not just existing, but institutional racism affects everything in our society.
Same question. When you look at me, Ms. Moon, what do you see?
I see a proud, strong black man who is a force in his community, a father, an activist, a leader, someone who has been working in this community for decades to build a better future city. And I recognize that we have systemic racism in our city of Seattle. We have had power in too few hands for too long. And I believe that the white people who've been running this town have had a death grip on what cannot change in this city, what they are preserving, the status quo they are trying to protect. And I'm ready to work together with communities of color to dismantle that from the inside out and across boundaries.
Thank you. Our next question will be coming from a representative of the Filipino community. I'd like to ask Mr. Bert Kawili to come up. Mr. Kawili does a show on our radio station called Phil Am Radio, and I would like you to address the candidates, and you'll each have 2 minutes to answer this question with a 30-second rebuttal.
Thank you, Tony. As Tony said, I am a co-host of the Phil Am Radio right here. It's a wonderful radio station. And I'm also the president of the Pacific Asian Empowerment Program, who have been transforming lives for the past 30 years. My question to both of you. I know that you have specific plans on how to address homelessness, okay? And I don't know which plan is better, but assuming that the plan is, your plans, individual plans, are really good, the city of Seattle is a welcoming city. And can you imagine that all of the homeless people from all over the United States might be coming over here, to take advantage of your wonderful plan. So my question is, and for both of you, how do you expect to be able to deal with this influx of other homeless people?
I believe that the threat you describe is not actually a realistic threat. I believe that people who have fallen into homelessness because of our housing affordability crisis, because the cost of living in our city is so high, because our state is 50th out of 50 in last place for funding mental health services. Those are the root causes of homelessness. People who move to Seattle move here for the same reason I did, for the same reason others in this community have, for opportunity. We come here thinking we're going to get a great job, and some of us do, and others realize between the cost of living and the housing affordability issue, they can't survive. Lots of folks 85% of the people who are experiencing homelessness in our city are from King County. They came here to work, they are from here, they are brothers and sisters, and I believe that it's our responsibility as a city to create spaces for them to come inside, because 90% of the folks sleeping outside would come inside if we offered them a place to meet their needs. So I believe that's the primary responsibility of the city, is to focus on how do we create places for them to come inside and get their lives back on track. Because having a roof over your head, a door to lock at night, a secure sleep is the very first step to getting on the road to getting your life back in order. And that's what we can do as a society. That's our responsibility. So I'm focused on all the solutions that the great people of Seattle have come up with already, but making sure we are investing adequately in low barrier shelters where people can come with their partner or a pet, in tiny house villages. These are the self-governed villages like you see at Othello or you see at 22nd and Jackson, where a group of folks, volunteers, have built a bunch of small, tiny little houses, put them on a lot together. There is self-governance, there's shared kitchen, there's shared bathrooms, there's shared showers, and folks live in these communities supporting each other, self-governing their village, and it's a great way to help people get back on their feet. So I'm focused on constructive solutions to help folks get inside, get their lives back on track.
All right, I know that there have been maybe subtle, maybe large differences in this issue. Ms. Durkan.
So thank you for that question. You know, I hear everywhere I go a question similar to that people are afraid that somehow if we're too generous, homeless people will move here. I don't think that's the case. And frankly, if we ever got to the time that we've helped too many people, that would be the greatest news we could have. You know, we know that the people who are experiencing homelessness are our brothers and sisters, and disproportionately, they're people of color, Native Americans, and so we have to look at the root causes. That's why my proposals to deal with homelessness are not just focused on the people who now are experiencing homelessness, but the people who are right on the brink. So many people, you know, rents have been raised so quickly in Seattle. For every $100 that rent goes up, people become homeless. The data is clear. And so in a city like ours, where costs are rising so rapidly, it's not surprising that we're seeing more people fall into homelessness. So my proposals start even before people fall into homelessness. It's why I want to have a rental voucher program. So, you know, too many people right now have been on the waiting list at Seattle Housing Authority for years and years. I just talked to a woman down here at the community center this week, 94 years old. She pays over $900 in rent, and yet she only gets $1,100 a month in her on a regular basis. She's on a fixed fee, 94 years old, and she's been on the waiting list forever. I want to make sure that we give her money so she doesn't fall into homelessness. Then we want to make sure we have better shelters. We want to make sure that we have tiny house villages. I have proposed to start citing those as soon as I become mayor so that we can have 1,000 new tiny houses for people to live in. So if we have better shelter system, more tiny houses, and shelters in every neighborhood in the city, which I'm also going to push for, then we'll have more room and shelter system. Then we just need to build as much affordable housing as quickly as we can, because Seattle's just become too unaffordable.
Okay, there is an opportunity for rebuttal here. I will just say this, there are many reasons for homelessness. And when you see these encampments, maybe folks don't always understand all these reasons for homelessness, and some of them do. We know that there are folks who are mentally ill. We know that there are folks who, unfortunately, it could be anyone end up homelessness. This is an opportunity to really define the difference in your positions in this next 30 seconds, because this is a critical issue. And Ms. Moon.
So I have a friend I've met through this campaign. I've talked with her 3-4 times. She calls herself a camp mom of an unsanctioned encampment. She is from Seattle. She had some medical issues. She lost her house, she lost her job because of medical issues. She is in treatment right now. She's getting daily medical care for her issues, but she cannot afford housing. She cannot be employed, she can't afford housing. She's on every waiting list there is, but there's no place for her to be. So she lives in an unsanctioned encampment. She keeps it tidy, she keeps it clean, she keeps fresh water. She calls herself Camp Mom because she runs the camp for a group of folks. This is the best option for her.
That is time. Again, 30 seconds. Another group that I didn't mention as I'm going here, and sometimes folks have been affected by drug use. that contributes to our homeless. Again, an opportunity to clearly define where you stand on this issue. You have 30 seconds, Mr.
I think you've nailed a big issue. Our defunding of mental health services and not having enough for the opiate addiction to deal with that is directly related to people living on the streets. We need to get more resources, and I have said throughout this campaign, I will not talk about raising any taxes until I can scrub the budget, but I tell everybody, everywhere, the one exception I think I'm going to have to come back for is more resources for people who have mental health issues and drug addiction issues. We know the opioid crisis is raging on our streets, and we don't have adequate resources. We need more.
This next question will concern our youth, our future. And in this particular instance, I'm talking about our youngest of youth. Our next question will come from Ms. Molly O'Connor, who is the Vice President of External Affairs with Thrive Washington. Thrive is not only a leader in the state, but a leader in this country in early education. And Molly, would you please come up and...
Thank you both for including early learning in your education platforms. That was a refreshing thing to read. Only 1 in 3 Seattle public school students from low-income families can read at grade level by the end of 3rd grade. According to lots of research, that means the other 2 out of 3 children are on a very real path to struggle throughout school, and chances are high they won't graduate. To change these outcomes, we need to do more for children before they even start kindergarten. What are your top priorities for the city's early learning efforts?
And that first question goes to you, Mr.
Thank you, Molly, for that question. I agree with you that there are probably, if we want to really plan for the future of this city, if we want Seattle to be the best place there is for the next generation, we have to invest in that generation today. And I would even back up the clock a little bit from you. I don't think it starts with early learning. I really believe it starts with good prenatal care for mothers and making sure we have good, affordable child care for mothers so mothers can still work in employment. They know it's safe for their kids. They can afford it. And then for early learning, we have to start earlier and really have holistic programs. You know, Seattle has one of the highest opportunity gaps in the nation. It's a crime for a city like ours that has so much resources. And if you look at the communities in color, particularly down here in South Seattle, the schools are struggling and too many kids are not making it through to graduation. And we're also seeing higher detention and suspension rates, particularly for black youth. So we have to really work on those issues. The one biggest tool that the city has is the Family and Education Levy, which is up for renewal next year. The mayor will have a critical role in shaping that. If I am mayor, I am going to work with communities, work with educators, work with parents to really figure out what do we need to do to tackle that opportunity gap. Because number one, we know that the testing process they have in place right now may not be working for kids in the South End. We also know that kids need more credible messengers than that they're getting. We need more preschool programs and after-school programs. But the other thing I want kids to shoot for is I want them to graduate. And if they do graduate, if I'm mayor, they will get 2 years free tuition in college. And we will have counselors in the high schools getting them ready to go to college, and counselors at the college when they land to help them navigate a program for them. Because we want our kids to thrive, and we want them to get all the great jobs that are in Seattle and growing in Seattle.
Ms. Moon.
So this issue is really near and dear to my heart. My mother was a Head Start teacher, and I went to Head Start with my mom as a young person. And it's essential to get great pre-K and great K through 12 education for everybody. This is a straight up equity issue. We all deserve to have a great education because we know that's how you give everybody an equal start in life. I believe the city's main responsibility here is threefold. First, we have to keep fighting with every other city, with every other community in this state to get full funding for public education. It is unconscionable to the degree to which we defund education in this state. We need to do better. We need McCleary fully funded to make sure everybody has what they need in the school system. Second, we do have 2 levies, the Family and Education Levy and the Pre-K Levy, that are both coming up next year. And I'm really proud to have the endorsement of the Seattle Education Association, the teachers union, because they understand my proposal for closing the opportunity gap with the city funding is the best proposal out there. And I am ready to work with educators. I'm ready to work with the community and make sure we are investing those city funds
in the most effective programs. And that means wraparound services, it means health services in the school, it means mentoring programs with culturally competent mentors, it means internships, it means after-school programs, it means summer programs. But we need to look at these with the right evaluation metrics to make sure we are investing in the best programs. A problem we have now, we have got to correct, is that too many of the programs rely on being able to prove with high-stakes test scores that they're having an effect. Well, if a community knows they need medical services, health services in the school system, that's not going to show up in test scores. We need to listen to the community, listen to educators, and build evaluation metrics so we know we are investing in the most effective program that the community needs.
All right, you have 30 seconds for rebuttal. We do know this, that a parent is a child's first and most teacher. We live in a different time where folks have one job, two jobs. Daycare has become, childcare has become something synonymous with having a child. But again, we do know that a parent is the first and most important teacher of a child. There are folks out there right now who are struggling to decide who should they trust with their child. We keep giving them these messages about the importance of the early years in life. We keep running out these statistics about by the time you're 3 years old, 85% of the brain development is done. If you hear this many words, your opportunities are better than if you hear this many words. You each have 30 seconds again to clarify your positions on Ms. O'Connor's question, and we'll start with you, Mr.
So I say to all those parents, we know how much you care, and I've not yet met a parent who wasn't willing to sacrifice everything they have to let their kid be better. I also know firsthand that we can't give up on any kid. You know, I spent 2 years as a high school teacher in between college and law school. I worked in a remote Eskimo fishing village, and my students, none of them spoke English as a native language. All of them lived in deep poverty. I taught them for 2 years, and at the end of those 2 years, it was amazing to me how engaged and what they could do because we in the school believed in them, worked with their parents, worked for their families. So that's what we have to do.
And Ms. Moon.
So I think, you know, all kids deserve access to great pre-K education. And I would encourage parents to understand that the city needs to do a better job of making sure we have culturally competent childcare across the city. This is especially an issue in the South End, in immigrant and refugee communities. There are great childcare providers who work in their homes, who work in their communities, but they don't meet the high expectations that the city has set to be able to qualify for the subsidies and the program we have. So we need to make sure we redesign that program so we can have culturally competent childcare in-home across the South End.
You're listening to RainierAvenueRadio.World. It's me, Tony B. This is not your typical debate. However, it is the final one. Your opportunity to make a decision. Take your ballot out right now, if you will. This may be the time when it's fresh on your mind and you want to say, you know what, I'm going to check the box. We're here to provide you with the information that you need to become more informed voters. We're going to stay with the theme of youth right now, and we'll have another host of our show, a 15-year-old high school sophomore who hosts a show called The Buzz. This particular 15-year-old sophomore has actually been doing speaking engagements and MC major fundraisers. So that's just a little plug for our show host, Taylor Corrine Pinkham.
Taylor Corrine is my first name, by the way. So I have grown up in a relatively diverse neighborhood and city. However, because of gentrification and upzoning, I rarely see people of color in my neighborhood or basically anyone that I normally would. This is changed in a forced manner. Affordable housing is usually the solution, but I and others don't really see any change because of this. Is affordable housing a cop-out almost for trying to find? Is it affordable housing a cop-out almost for not trying to find and solve the roots of gentrification? I would appreciate an answer that I would not be able to read on your website, and an answer that you won't promote yourself by being off. Thanks.
And this question goes to you.
Thank you for that question, because that really is the heart of the matter for me in this city. I feel our city is racing towards a cliff. We are becoming a playground for the wealthy, and it's because we are refusing to confront that we have a deeply unfair, deeply unequal economic system where all the wealth we're generating is going to the lucky few, where we have a housing market where everyone behaves as if it's okay for whoever has the most money to win, to take over a neighborhood. I am ready to really understand the root causes of gentrification and displacement, which is systemic racism, which is widening wealth inequality, and which is this refusal to take control of the housing market and make sure it works for everyone. So this is the main centerpiece of my platform. How do we create a housing market where we stop the escalation that's caused by speculation, by outsiders driving up our prices just for the benefit to themselves? They're profiteering off of our pain. We have got to stop this kind of speculation that is driving up prices and forcing so many people to move out of our city. Second, we've got to look specifically at communities of color, the ones that have not been blasted out of the city already, and work with them to develop solutions, work with you to develop solutions around keeping affordable housing, housing that's affordable to you, retail spaces that are for your local business, and develop community benefit agreements with any future development we do in our city. Places like Africatown, like Liberty Bank, like what is happening at the Capitol Hill Light Rail Station. The city can convene these conversations and create a community benefit agreement where any new development has to be equitable, has to be developed with you, and the city has to enforce that the development will meet your needs. Because we are in a position now where in the Central District, it used to be 70% African American, it's now 17%. We cannot let that happen anymore. We've got to reverse it, and I'm ready to stand up to powerful special interests and implement real solutions.
Ms. Durkan?
So I'm going to take your question and directly talk to you. I don't think affordable housing is a cop-out, but I do think it is something that comes after the fact when you haven't done what you need to do to stop it in the first place. So we absolutely need more affordable housing because people are struggling in this city. And by affordable, I would use everything from low income to middle class. People can't afford to live here. But the real root of gentrification, many of the roots are, number one, the systemic racism, but two, combined with that is in this city and in this state, we have failed on the promise of economic development for communities of color, and particularly for the African American community. If you look at what happened after Initiative 200 passed in this region alone and in this city, we went from having about 20% of public dollars, contracting dollars, going to minority businesses. It's now less than 1%. And they just did a study at the State Department of Transportation. The groups that have fared the worst are African American businesses, by far. And so what we need to do really is to have economic empowerment so people don't just have to have affordable housing, they can have any house they want. And if I'm mayor, I am going to push the limits on I-200. We will make sure that the billions and billions of dollars we are spending, we will try to put more of them in the pockets of those minority businesses who have been pushed to the side. Because that's what we've also lost in this city. That wealth has drained out of the Black community. And we need to fix that, because if we don't fix that, we will never get to the point where there's true equity or equality. That doesn't mean we don't have to work hard on institutional racism, because we do, in every part of the city and every institution of the city. But we also have to make sure that people have an equal shot at education, like we were talking about before, and at really earning their way. And if I'm mayor, I'm going to push hard on that.
All right, 30 seconds.
I just feel like you are glossing over the issue. I think that we have a deep wealth inequality in this city because of systemic racism, and giving more contracts to minority-owned businesses is a good thing. We should be doing that, but we really need to tackle the root causes of racism. We need to make sure we are sharing power across race and class and gender in the mayor's office. We need to make sure we're implementing the Race and Social Justice Initiative throughout the whole city. We need to be using a racial equity lens with every allocation of resources in the city. This is a deep problem, and just like glossing over it and not addressing the true inequality in this market is not getting us anywhere.
30 seconds.
So I'm not glossing over anything. We've done 80 of these forums. You know I believe deeply that we have to address institutional racism. I took this as a question of what are the 2 things we can do to stop gentrification? And if you look at the walls in this room, it means deep community involvement of people saying, here's how we're going to fight for our community. But we also have to make sure there's real economic opportunity available for folks. And we have to attack systemic racism. But if we don't put money in people's pockets, they will never be able to afford to stay in this city.
All right, quick wild card question here in 30 seconds, and let's get through this. You ready? 30 seconds. Ms. Moon, tell me the benefits of gentrification.
The benefits only accrue to the wealthy people who can come in and take advantage of a historically depressed, redlined area. White people coming in and buying at a lower price than they can afford in neighborhoods that have been historically white neighborhoods, they benefit, and the pain all goes to the community that built that neighborhood, that has lived there, that has created that neighborhood over decades, that has built community there. They all suffer and lose.
Ms. Durkan, the benefits of gentrification.
I would say this is one where there's not any daylight between Cary Moon and I. I agree with her that we've got to make sure those benefits don't just accrue to the people who are pushing people out, that what we actually give people is the power to stay where they are and provide for them, their families, their safety, and their neighborhoods.
There is discussion about sanctuary city, who's welcome, who's not welcome, and Seattle being a fairly progressive city may come into conflict with federal policies that are now being put in place. Our next guest is the communications director? Coordinator for the Council on American Islamic Relations, Raisha Khan.
Thank you, Tony, and thank you, Jenny and Carrie, for your time today. So, as Tony mentioned, my name is Raisha Khan, and I work for the Council on American Islamic Relations in the Washington chapter. I'm a U.S. citizen, I'm a registered voter, and I'm an American Muslim. And I attended grade school in the city of Seattle, and I'm now lucky to be working in a beautiful city. And I am just one of millions upon millions of American Muslims who are driven by my faith to pursue higher education and give back to society. And yet, unfortunately, today, good, hardworking families and children have become targets of hate attacks and violence, and that includes in our city as well. And sadly, I've been victim to such hate and violence as well, myself. CAIR has documented that the number of hate crimes in the first half of 2017 has spiked 91% as compared to the same time period in 2016, and that includes attacks on over 100,000 American Muslims in the city of Seattle as well. And we have received reports of anti-Muslim slurs being spewed at individuals, and that includes vandalism, such as what occurred at Kent High School just last week, not far from here, with threats to kill the Muslim students that were that attend Kent High School. So my question to you both is, what steps will you take to ensure the rights and protection of American Muslims in Seattle during this time of heightened Islamophobia? Thank you.
That question goes to you, Mr.
Thanks so much for raising that question. It is really a real concern. And as you know, when I was U.S. Attorney, we were at a point when the Obama administration came in under George W. Bush, there had been a similar spike in anti-Muslim activity, particularly people trying to equate that with terrorism. I worked very closely with a number of mosques in town, with your organization as well, to make sure that people understood we will stand in solidarity with you, and we will do everything we can to help educate people that what that is wrong. You know, we had an event, for example, when I was going into a series of mosques, and the FBI and other people said, well, we got to go and talk about radicalization. And I said, no, this is for parents. Why don't I go in and do the same thing they're worried about as every other parent, which is cyberbullying. And I had a very robust program, and as a result, I was attacked by the alt-right as being in favor of Sharia law. We've seen now again with this president, because of what he says and the hate he says is legitimate, there's a rise in these kinds of rhetoric and attacks again. So as a city, we will not stand for it. You know, it's why when the Muslim ban came down, I drove to the airport and worked with other people to make sure that 2 men who had been put on a jet to send to Dubai could land safely in Seattle. And working with them was able to get that in place and get those men off the airplane. I will work against that kind of hate. And we need to have it through education and enforcement. But the number one thing a mayor can do is, number one, make sure you stand up for what is right. 2, you work with the communities to see how can I help more. And 3, you make sure the city walks the walk themselves. That we are hiring Muslims, we are standing with people, that we have a government that looks like the rest of society. And I've been proud to have that kind of support in my campaign. I will continue to have those dialogues with the community and make sure that we always stand up for what is right.
Ms. Moon.
So this is incredibly maddening in 2017 that we're having this conversation. I want to make sure that our city is a leader across the country in standing up for all our brothers and sisters, regardless of race or ethnic origin or country of origin. We need to stand together in solidarity. There's several things we need to do. We need to keep going with anti-bias, anti-racist training in the police force and make sure we have culturally competent police officers from all the communities that comprise the city to make sure that people know when they call 911, someone will come to help them, not to hurt them. This is absolutely essential because the police are our first line of defense. We need to make sure we are promoting cross-cultural solidarity relentlessly throughout all our advocacy organizations, and the mayor's office needs to always stand for that and always support that. We need to make sure we expand the Office of Immigrant and Refugee Affairs. This is the central place in the city that does this work on behalf of city government. We need to increase their funding, increase their staffing, because the challenge keeps getting bigger. We need to make sure we are funding all the organizations out in community that are doing this work. The first place people call when they need help, we need to make sure they have adequate funding to do their work and build capacity in their community, in their organizations, because they are essential protectors of community. We need to also make sure that the legal defense fund we set up last year is adequately funded. I heard the other day that one of the groups has already spent 3/4 of their money in the first month of the program, so we're probably going to have to add more money to the legal defense fund. And I think this rise in hate crimes is happening throughout the city, so we really need to double down on the race and social justice initiative within the city, because city government all needs to be pulling in the same direction to be anti-racist in every single way we practice city government. It's going to take all of these things together. It's going to take our whole community understanding this is happening and locking arms together to protect our brothers and sisters.
Ms. Durkan, 30 seconds.
So this is going to be an ongoing work, not just for our city, but for our country. But I think this is where this city can really lead the way. You know, this is one of the areas where I think we see the absolute worst coming out of Washington, D.C. and Donald Trump. The way he marginalizes people, whether it is our Muslim brothers and sisters or our black brothers and sisters, he tries to paint people as other and pit people against them. I think Seattle has to rise up and show that we will not stand for hate crimes. You know, I prosecuted, investigated those when I was U.S. Attorney. As mayor, I will make sure that I work with communities to see what we need to do.
And Ms. Moon.
And again, I think we have a heroic Attorney General, Bob Ferguson, who is on the front lines of this fight, and City Attorney Pete Holmes is doing some of this. He needs to step up. I would support both of them in every single effort to push back against the Trump administration and make sure we are protecting justice for everybody who lives in our city and in our state. So I'm ready to stand with them and do whatever work is needed for the next 4 years.
This will be the final question from our guest, Mr. Clifford Cawthon, who also does a show on Rainier Avenue Radio called Grass to the Top with political commentary. He's also an adjunct professor at Bellevue College and had a project for his students. And this is the end result of that project. The question is coming from the students. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Ben. Appreciate you. So, we've been covering a variety of topics, most notably elections and also representation. And my students asked a number of questions. Unfortunately, we won't have time to go over all of them, but I can certainly connect you. And certainly, if you ever want to come by a free morning, feel free to stop in. So, one of the questions they had was actually very interesting, is around campaign finance and particularly transparency and contributions and transparency in funding campaigns, because as both of you know, both of you have a lot of privilege and are very lucky to be able to have the connections to finance campaign, and for a number of people in the community that's often a barrier to them actually stepping up and running for office. So one of my students actually asked, what are your thoughts on campaign finance reform? We've done a little bit of that here in Seattle with democracy vouchers, and of course with our progressive community, that we want to take that further, or at least as a sense we want to take that further in the future. So one of them asked, what are your thoughts, and how have both of you been transparent about how your campaigns are financed, and yeah, and how would you seek that transparency in the Office of Mayor here in Seattle?
And Ms. Moon.
That is a great question. Thank you for asking it, students, because you hit the nail on the head. I think everyone in this city, in this state, in this country knows that money is poisoning democracy. The special influence that people with wealth and privilege, that corporations believe they deserve to have when they contribute thousands, tens of thousands of dollars to campaigns, is preventing progress on so many fronts. So I was proud to have been one of the initiators and one of the crafters of Honest Elections Seattle. Helping get money out of politics is essential in this city. I wish this race were publicly financed because it would be a much different race if it were. I have also developed a strategy and a strategic plan and helped launch a statewide organization to get money out of politics and return democracy to the people that launched in February called the Democracy Hub, because this is core. I think everyone understands, especially since Citizens United, that private special interests fighting for their own profits, for their own wealth, are trying to take over democracy. They did it at the federal level, they're doing it at the state level, and in the city, democracy still works. So we need to fight against corporate takeover of our democracy. And in my campaign, I have been saying this from the beginning. I've talked about sharing power across race and class and gender, because I believe a few wealthy white people and their corporate connections feel like they deserve to run this city. And they are the reason we have such widening wealth inequality. They are the reason we have the housing affordability crisis that has not been addressed yet. They are the reason we have such opportunity gap in our schools. And I am fighting hard against that, and I am committed, once I'm in office, to sharing power, to making sure folks from lower income communities and communities of color have power, have a seat at the table, are shaping solutions together, because this is what it's going to take to reclaim our city and make sure it works for the well-being of everyone.
Ms. Durkan.
So I think if we had the ideal situation, we would have 100% publicly financed campaigns, so that we would take all of the money out of politics and everybody would have an equal footing. We know under the current law that's not ability. The next best thing would be only individuals can give, only people. You would have no corporations, no billionaires giving lots, and no self-financing. You would have, every campaign would have to rely on people supporting their campaign. Now that's not legal yet either, but I think we should work as a city and a state to overcome Citizens United. We should find an avenue to say, you know what, we're gonna make it in our state that corporations can't give money, and let them challenge it, and let's take that up again, because I think we could have a different result, because we now have the data that shows nationwide what has happened since that decision, which they didn't have when they did it. So, I've been very proud to have built a broad-based coalition in my campaign. I've got supporters from business and from workers, from environmentalists, from civic activists. I've also have probably the record number of individuals who have given to a campaign. Thousands and thousands of people have stood up and donated to me, which is both a credible honor but an obligation, because those people expect you to go out and fight for the people. So that's what I'll do, but I think we should try to reform even more how our campaign finance works.
All right. 30 seconds.
So I just have to point out, I'm the one who's not taking corporate contributions. I'm the one who doesn't have almost $1 million of funding working for my campaign like my opponent does, from Comcast, from CenturyLink, from AT&T, from Amazon, from Microsoft, the big corporations who don't want change. They like the system exactly the way it is. They like it that we don't have municipal broadband and they can charge exorbitant rates for internet, especially in the South End. They like it we don't have a high earners income tax or income tax at all. They are investing in my opponent for a reason, and just think about what that reason might be.
So first, listeners need to understand that those people given to a campaign committee I have by law can't control. I've said I don't like it. I wish they wouldn't do it. And frankly, I don't need it, because the number of contributors and volunteers who stood up for my campaign, I was out knocking doors today. We've contacted over 80,000 voters, on the doors, on the phones. That's the kind of campaign I've been running as a grassroots-based campaign. I haven't self-financed like my opponent has. At the end of this campaign, she'll put almost $400,000 of her own money.
You know, I think we gotta take that money out of it and corporations.
She's making that number up, I just want to say that.
Time. Well, here we go. This is your opportunity. It's about time for closing statements. Before that, I mentioned that there would be another wild card. This is an opportunity to ask a question of your opponent. Ms. Moon, you are going first. You can ask a question of the candidate, Ms. Durkan. Ms. Durkan, you will have 1 minute to respond to the question. And Ms. Moon, your question is?
So at a time when 50% of Seattleites make under $50,000 a year, when so many people are struggling to make ends meet, who can't afford housing, who feel like they're slipping beneath the surface, this status quo is not working. Why do you think so many corporations are giving so much money, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars, your campaign to protect the status quo? What are they afraid of changing, and what do you think they're investing in? What are they going to get out of you? Because it certainly seems like it's in their interest to buy your campaign for you.
Well, first, you know they haven't given that money to my campaign, and we've been in many, many of these forums. It's an independent committee. Though everyone who gives to my campaign, the thousands of voters from every part of the city, and every person who supports me knows my record. And for 30 years, I have worked in this city standing up for the Seattle progressive values. I fought for criminal justice reform. I fought for LGBTQ rights. I fought and established a civil rights unit in the U.S. Attorney's Office that went from 1 case to 100 cases today. And I fought for police reform even when I was in law enforcement. New law enforcement had to be more equitable. So anybody who wants me to be mayor knows the kind of mayor I'm going to be. I'm going to fight for every corner of the city so every kid, like we talked about before, has the chance to succeed in this city. I want Seattle to fulfill the promise that this nation has denied to others.
Ms. Durkan, you also have the opportunity to ask a question, if you choose, of your opponent. And Ms. Moon, you will have 1 minute to respond. Ms. Durkan, would you like to ask a question?
No, I'm good.
No? Okay. That being the case, I think that this is an opportunity to give a round of applause to all the folks who joined us. And please give a round of applause to both of our candidates. At this point, I would like to invite everyone to take a look at what you see behind you, the People's Map of Rainier Valley. This is a RainierAvenueRadio.World project. The artist is Norma Baum. You see the various communities listed. What we are going to do between now and the time that you take oath of office is go out to our community and ask folks what they would like to see in their particular community. And then what we would like to do when you get into office is present this to you and show you what our community has asked in our various smaller communities, what they would like to see happen in their community. So I just wanted y'all to know that. That's what this is for. You see it now, it's blank. By the time we present it to you, we would like to do it at City Hall, and it should be filled with information from youth, adults, seniors, everyone who lives in the various communities about what their thoughts are, what they'd like to see. Again, this is RainierAvenueRadio.World. This is it. That's all the time that we have. It is now time for final comments. And Ms. Moon, you will go first. You have 2 minutes for a final statement, your final words of all of these debates to make an impression. I will tell you, I am still, like many others, undecided about what, who, when, how, and I think this is going to really be it for me. And again, a lot of our listeners out there, no pressure, but at the same time, we need to know who we're voting for and why we're voting for them. You have 2 minutes to convince me, maybe the folks in the audience, and all the folks listening on the air.
Well, thank you for this awesome conversation, because this is what inspires me about this city. So many people believe we have a right to shape our destiny, believe that we have a right to define how we live in relation to one another, what kind of shared economic system we want, what kind of society we want. Do we want to be a city that is affordable, that is creative, that is inclusive, that is committed to shared prosperity, that is diverse? That is the vision for Future Seattle that I have been running on since day one, and I have spent 6 months of this campaign listening building solutions together with community, and it is inspiring me to a degree I can't even describe, because we can be the place that shows the rest of the country what a progressive city committed to the well-being of everyone looks like. We can be the place that shows democracy still works. We can be the place that figures out real solutions to housing affordability, to gentrification and displacement, to achieving real racial equity in how we share power within city government and within the community. We can be the city that gets ahead of the homelessness crisis, that figures out how to take this tremendous wealth that we have created in this economy and make sure it stays in community, reinvesting back into creating wealth and opportunity for the next generation and economic resilience for everybody. And this campaign has taught me that we have everything we need right in this city. We have the brain power, we have the ideas, we have the commitment to the well-being of one another. All it's going to take is a leader ready to lead that, ready to share power, ready to build solutions together, ready to build a collective sense of collective endeavor so we are all fighting for the same future vision. What we lack now is the courage to implement bold solutions. I am not afraid to say difficult things to powerful people. I am ready to lead that change in our city together with all the great residents of the city of Seattle. Thank you.
All right, and again, no pressure, but this is the final fight. These are the last words of the debates that you will have. These are the last words that you will have with your opponent. Again, same situation, the opportunity to convince me, to convince those few folks in our audience, and to convince their constituencies and the folks who are listening on the radio why they should vote for you for mayor. Here are your 2 minutes.
Thank you again. Thanks to Rainier Avenue Radio. This is just, oops, I missed that one. Rainier Avenue Radio. This has been a great debate, but I want everyone to think about what this is at stake at this election. It's really not about who's going to be mayor. It's about what will this city be like for the next 4 years, but more importantly for the next generation. I've got 2 boys, one's 16, one's 20, and I look at this race every day thinking about what is the city we will leave them. Will they love Seattle as much as I love Seattle growing up? Right now, I think that answer would have to be no, because too many places from too many people, I have heard the simple question of, is there a place for me here? Is there a place for me here? And that comes from people who are afraid that because of the president we have, that there's not a place for them because of who they are, because of their race, or their faith, or their economic status. And from other people it is because they don't feel that there's an economic place for them in this city. It grew so rapidly and is so expensive. Their kids can't live here and they can't live here. And then you look at others, just think is the jobs that have been created here have nothing to do with my life. I can't work in those big shiny towers. And so I think we have to vote for the person and be that kind of city that says, this is who we are, this is what we stand for, and make sure every kid, everyone my age, every senior knows there is a place for you here. We will make sure there is a place for you, not just today, but in 5 years, in 10 years, in 20 years. And we have to make that real, so that means more affordable housing. It means more protection for our seniors. It means taking critical actions today to get people out of tents, out of cars, and into safe places and warm places. So we've got critical challenges facing us. We've got to solve them, but we've got opportunity here too. We have the opportunity to show how you can do it right. And I believe Seattle can. I look in this room and I see solutions. I see solutions. In every community I've gone to, people have solutions. That's what I want to look for.
That is it. I am going to have to, yes. Thank you for listening to RainierAvenueRadio.World. Number 6, Karen?
7.
7. Number 7. This was our 7th debate. We held debates on council position number 8, council position number 9, Port Commission position number 1, Port Commission number 3,
4.
Port Commission number 4, and City Attorney, and we closed it all down with the mayoral debate. So I'll give Rainier Avenue Radio.
Yeah.
That's how we get down. And I will certainly open the door up that whoever is elected, whoever is our next mayor, please take advantage of us as a resource to communicate information and share with our audience. You are more than welcome to come back. And if you want a show called Ask the Mayor, please, you can come back and you can have a monthly program called Ask the Mayor, or a weekly program, or if you want to get down every day, you can come in here.
All right, not at Brand X, sorry about that.
And you can have a show on Rainier Avenue Radio, so the offer is extended, and I think it would be a great thing to have. One more again, a round of applause for our candidates. And they've chosen to choose a leadership position. Thank you both. And that's it. And again, I'll be listening on Monday. You can listen on Monday. You can listen again on Tuesday to this very same debate. If you need more answers, listen carefully. I'm still swirling it around, so I'll be listening again on Monday. Thank you for being here. And now back to our regularly scheduled programming. Don't forget, at 3 o'clock, we'll be at Memorial Stadium broadcasting the game between O'Day and Shayla Park, Metro League playoffs. That will be followed by Garfield against Everett. Again, broadcast live on RainierAvenueRadio.World. Play-by-play by former Seahawk legends Edwin Bailey and Randall Morris doing the color commentary. Rick Dupree will be doing the play-by-play for Game 1 against with O'Day, and I'll be doing the play-by-play in Game 2. So we'll talk to you later. Back to our regularly scheduled program. Thank you. All right.
All right, that was great. Thanks a lot.